Chapter 25.
Yes, Captain.
Ugh. Rinoa threw herself backwards on the garden bench.
I don't get it. You're doing fine,
Squall said, picking up the cards.
Triple triad isn't so difficult. You're just not thinking through your steps.
Rinoa mimicked him unhappily as she forced herself up. She had lost every game she had played with Squall thus far. He had agreed to teach her this, as he had taught her many other things. And because he considered this training, they weren't trading cards between them as she lost. Which was a good thing, because she would probably be out of cards by this point if they were.
How did that card flip that one? Mine is so much stronger. Only on the one side. And we aren't using plus rules, so there's no way that card would have flipped mine. Plus rules.
Rinoa frowned.
I don't want to know. I don't. Don't tell me. Okay, tell me.
2 minutes later, Rinoa was groaning again, her head reeling.
I don't get it.
Squall grinned at her as he put his cards back in his deck.
Want to keep going or are you done? No way.
Rinoa sat up quickly.
I swear I am beating you at least once before this day is over.
An hour later, Rinoa still hadn't won a hand. She was practically crying, accusing Squall of cheating, and hating all of her cards. He never once tried to throw the game for her. He didn't go easy on her. And, somehow, she appreciated that more than anything. He was still holding her on the same level as himself. Which, while probably unfair, made her feel good. She disliked being coddled. And then, at long last.
Ah!
Rinoa nearly cried in relief.
A tie. We tied. Good job,
Squall said, gathering his cards up.
Want to keep going? No way. I'm taking that as a victory and I'm going to be happy with it. I'll beat you at cards some other time. When you're not cheating. I wasn't cheating.
Rinoa sighed and put her deck back together.
How are you so good at everything? I'm not.
Squall stood from the bench and stretched. The garden was moving quickly. Much more quickly, in fact, than Squall would have believed given how slowly it had drifted at sea for 3 days straight. They had left FH just this morning and, as the evening was approaching, Nita had announced over the intercom that they would be landing on the beach at VIII shortly. Rinoa stood up after him, putting her cards in her pocket.
Well, it's past lunch. You wanna grab something to eat?
Squall shrugged and was about to ask if she wanted to chance the cafeteria or the guy fishing in the quad when the intercom dinged above them.
Squall, this is Nita speaking. You're needed on the deck.
Rinoa groaned, putting her head on her hand.
Duty calls. Again. I don't think we're ever going to get to actually eat together.
Squall frowned and remembered what she had said about her father. About how he had worked his way right out of her good graces. He didn't want to end up in that same position.
Hey, when we land in VIII, I'll take you somewhere. Hey? Really?
Rinoa lifted her head, her eyes shining. He shrugged.
Sure. VIII has the best seafood anywhere. I've been told you have to try it if you go. Okay,
Rinoa beamed.
It's not a date though,
Squall said quickly, making sure she understood. Rinoa chuckled and nodded.
You should go, Commander. You're needed on deck. Ugh! Don't call me that!
He rolled his eyes as he turned to leave.
Hey, Squall!
Rinoa called out after him, making him stop and turn.
Why do you not like being called commander? You didn't like squad leader either, now that I think about it. Why do you say?
Squall trailed off as he remembered his promise to talk more.
I don't like the assumed sense of responsibility and expectation that comes with it.
Rinoa smiled gratefully and nodded. He turned to leave, wondering if that was the answer she was looking for. She had been asking him questions like that all day. Why don't you try to order hot dogs like everyone else? Why did you pick the gunblade? Why did you pick Shiva as a GF? Why did she pick you? Why did you decide to be a seed? Just one thing after another. Curiosity that seemed only to grow stronger the more he appeased it. He didn't care what food tasted like as long as it had the nutrition he wanted. Because he couldn't resist a challenge and the gunblade was a big one. He didn't choose Shiva, Shiva chose him. Reasons that she kept to herself. It just seemed natural since he went here. With each question, Rinoa would smile. She just wanted him to answer, apparently. It felt awkward for Squall, who usually tried to keep such things to himself. Yet that smile. That was such a reward in and of itself. And she seemed to get closer to him each time that he gave her an honest response. Like all she wanted was for him to talk to her. As if such a simple thing was the greatest thing in the world. And now, finally, they were heading back to Balam. They wanted to check on the town, to make sure everything was all right. And, once they had, he would take her to eat. Then he would show her the famed Balam beaches. She seemed really excited about it. The look on Nita's face when he rode up to the deck gave him a sinking feeling about those plans.
What is it?
He asked, stepping forward.
We're coming up towards Balam. And? Well, check it out.
Nita jerked his head forward. Squall stepped up onto the platform and cursed under his breath. The island of Balam wasn't exactly large. It wasn't all that far from the beach to the town. In some parts, it was right on it. The garden was already starting up said beach. Squall could already make out the glow of the garden ring under the surface of the water as it traveled up. From here, Squall could also see the wall that surrounded the town. And the enormous, red, floating building parked near it.
Galbadia Garden was remolded from an old shelter, too,
Nita said, making a face.
Do you think they copied us after they saw our garden, or we just happened upon the same mechanism at the same time? What are the odds of it happening randomly twice?
Squall sneered, putting his hand to his waist as he tried to decide what to do. Nita continued on course, waiting for his orders patiently.
All right,
Squall nodded once.
Change direction. I want you to go towards the old garden location. I don't want to get too close to them. Roger, changing course,
Nita responded, adjusting himself at the stick.
They're awful close to Balam. You think they've already made their way in? Yeah, I do.
Squall let out a long breath. Meaning they were probably going to have to break their way into the town.
All right. Call Quistis and Zell to come up to the bridge to meet me.
Nita pulled down the intercom and let out the announcement as Squall returned to the platform and wrote it down. It only took a few moments. Quistis arrived first. Zell a few moments later.
What's up?
He asked, grinning.
We home yet? Yeah, and we have a problem,
Squall frowned. He explained what Nita had spotted and let them infer what it meant. They came to the same conclusion he had.
Then Balam is under the sorceress's occupation,
Quistis bit her lip.
General Caraway did say that she was going to use their garden as a base. I guess she has. Damn it! My ma is there!
Zell yelled loudly.
Squall, let me go down, please. That's why I called you two up here. The three of us are from Balam, after a fashion. I want us to go in first, scope things out. See if we can get them out on our own or at least get some information. Zell. Yeah.
Zell growled, clearly angry.
I am taking you with me because I know your mother is in Balam. However, I expect you not to mess up like you did in Timber. Understand me?
Zell's face hardened and he nodded.
You got it. I won't screw up twice, Squall. Guarantee it. Good.
Squall. Nita called out.
You two go get ready.
Squall backed up towards the lift again.
I'll meet you down by the front gates in a few minutes to make our way inside.
He rode up and walked over to see Nita pointing down.
Look.
Squall did so and frowned. The place where the garden had once stood was now a wide, rather deep crater. The garden, unearthing itself following by the missile blast, had dug a scar deep into the earth. It was daunting to see, but not the sort of thing that Squall needed to be updated about. He was just opening his mouth to ask Nita what was wrong when he spotted it. There. On the edge of the crater, in a shanty town that had been built of tents and whatever else could be salvaged, were a group of people that were all gathering together. Squall grabbed the binoculars that Nita was holding out to him and he lifted them to his eyes. Garden students. Garden seeds. Some in uniform, others not. They were all waving at the garden, bright smiles on their faces. A few of them were crying in relief.
Those evacuated during the fighting?
Nita asked curiously.
Probably,
Squall nodded.
Okay, I'm going out with Quistis and Zell. Nita, alert everyone in the garden that we're going to be taking on those people. Have Sue handle checking them all in and gathering reports. I'll deal with it when I get back. Roger.
Nita reached for the intercom again. Squall heard him relaying the instructions as he made his way down through the garden. By the time he got to the gates, many people had already gathered there. Drive Katawaki was on site, prepared to deal with the injured. Someone had brought out food and drink for the weary, and Sue was already on scene, giving orders to a few other seeds she had recruited to get a record of those incoming. Quistis and Zell were standing apart from the hubbub with Rinoa.
Hey,
she waved as he came in closer.
They told me what happened. Galbadia Garden is moving too. Apparently so.
Squall took her by the arm and walked her a few steps away from the others. Zell and Quistis shared a grin when he did so.
What's up?
Rinoa asked when he stopped and looked back at her.
I'm sorry,
he made a face.
I might have to cancel those dinner plans.
Rinoa's eyes went wide.
What?
He frowned. She shook her head.
Nothing. It's just... I'm surprised. You kind of have more important things to worry about right now. I don't want to turn into your father,
he admitted unhappily.
Oh, Squall.
Rinoa smiled softly.
Hey, you are not turning into my father. Trust me. If you start, I'll let you know immediately. That man made excuses to get away from me. You're apologizing over something that's not your fault. And we did play cards all morning. It's fine. In fact, is there anything that I can help with? Make it easier.
Squall looked at her, gratitude shifting across his face for a brief moment before he looked over.
Drive Katawaki could probably use some help. The people we're getting in are evacuees. They'll be tired and ready for the comforts of garden. Just see what you can do around here. You got it,
Rinoa nodded.
And you be careful. Hey. Be careful, she repeated. I may forgive you for canceling dinner, but I won't forgive you for coming back injured or worse. You understand me?
Squall had never had someone worry over him before. It was a slightly novel experience. Just the act of someone telling him, be careful instead of good luck was new. That she was saying it, though, meant that she was waiting for him to come back. That she was worrying about him while he was gone. And that was the first time Squall could ever say someone had felt that way about him.
All right,
he nodded.
If I'm not back by tonight, I'll be back tomorrow morning.
Rinoa smiled.
I'll be waiting.
Squall reached out and touched her hand gently as he walked past her back towards Quistis and Zell. It was a brief stroke, soft and quick. But Rinoa's heart raced when she felt it, because Squall had reached out for her, not the other way around. She turned and smiled as he joined with the others and they walked forward. Getting out of the garden was a bit of a hassle. The front gates now just led to a drop-off that hung out fairly close to the revolving rings that kept the garden up. The FH technicians, however, had taken that into account when performing repairs. And though the front gate had been buried underwater, they had still built a lift that could be quickly installed to serve as a departure point. The old gatekeeper now was in charge of operating the lift. Squall, Quistis, and Zell stepped aboard and were treated to the maiden voyage down. It moved at a decent pace, but the garden was high off of the ground. The lift hit the grass more than a few seconds later and they were immediately descended upon by students and seeds. Squall paused then to explain that they would be debriefed by Sue once they had been checked into the garden. He fielded fast reports about Galbadia Garden floating near Balam. Quistis saw fit to alert them all that Headmaster Sid had promoted Squall to commander before he could stop her. Then he had to deal with cheering and congratulations. It took longer than he would have preferred to escape the crowd. By the time they left, 2 groups had already been hauled up the lift to the garden above. Injured and ill first. There were many of them that the headmaster had forced out when the fighting began. With them all returning, the garden would finally feel full again. The town of Balam wasn't under siege. Not anymore. It was officially occupied and taken over. Without Balam Garden and its seeds to offer protection, the peaceful harbor town had fallen only too easy to Gabladia's military might. When Squall stepped through the gates of the town, it was to see some town folk already milling about and a Galbadian soldier standing guard at the entrance that had been mostly blocked by Galbadian army vehicles.
What the hell?
Zell yelled, running up to the soldier.
What's going on here?
The soldier growled at them.
This town is under the control of Sorceress Edia. The town is off limits while we conduct an investigation for a wanted criminal. It will last for several days. Once we're through with our investigation, you're to be questioned. So just stay out and stay put.
Squall reached out and pulled Zell away from the soldier. Mostly because it looked like Zell was about to deck him and Squall didn't want to start a commotion. Not yet, at least.
An investigation,
Quistis repeated as the three of them stood back.
What wanted criminal? You don't think they're after us, do you? No, I think they're after Elone,
Squall said.
Wanted criminal just sounds better. Great, so what do we do?
Zell grumbled.
We need to get inside, don't we?
Squall made a thoughtful sound as he considered their options. They could sneak in. Try to find a way past the guard. And there was always the option of just busting in old-fashioned style.
Hey,
the guard called out to them, putting his hand to his belt where his saber rested.
You guys look suspicious. What are you doing here?
Squall looked back at him evenly, wondering if he should just kill him. Let's see what info he could find first. Violence could always be taken as a later option.
What's Galbadia doing in a town like this?
The soldier looked mad that he dared question him back.
You tell me what you're doing here now, punk. Are you residents here? Yeah, that's right.
Zell jumped in eagerly.
At least residents should be allowed in. It's off limits.
The soldier snapped, the tone of his voice made it sound like he had been repeating that phrase for a while now.
You cannot enter or leave. Do you understand? Oh, yeah.
Zell stepped up to the guard, his temper riled. Squall frowned because his gauntlets had started smoking.
Who do you think you're talking to?
The guard glared at him, at the smoke coming from his gauntlets. Squall moved quickly and grabbed Zell by the shoulder. Shiva hissed because his body was too hot, but Squall's cold affect naturally cancelled it out. He pushed Zell back, towards Quistis, and stepped forward in his place.
What? You got a problem, too, punk?
The soldier asked him, his hand twitching on his saber. Squall regarded him carefully, then made a chance decision.
You said the town was off limits. Does that mean we can't deliver a message, either?
The G-soldier looked at him, confused, and Squall shrugged nonchalantly.
That's too bad. We have some info on Elone. What? Elo.
The soldier gaped like a fish for a moment. He turned quickly to see if Squall had been overheard. He came in closer and whispered,
Okay, just wait a minute. Tell me everything you know about her. Do you actually know who she is? Kind of.
Squall said noncommittally.
But we came to Balam because we needed to confirm something about her before we could hand it in as truth. We wouldn't want to give the sorceress false information and waste her time.
The soldier opened his mouth a couple times like he wanted to say something. Like maybe he wanted to demand the information. Squall's words had been carefully chosen though. He had given him an offer he couldn't refuse. Turn them away and they could lose info on Elone and be punished. Demand it now without confirmation and it could prove false and they could be punished. The soldier weighed the pros of being the one to hand in the info against the cons of the punishment he would receive if it were false and came to a decision.
If you have any information at all, go talk to the commander. She's staying at the hotel. You will be rewarded.
Squall grinned and nodded as the soldier stepped aside to let them through. Who needed force when you could just fib your way through? The three of them walked into the occupied town. There were Galbadian soldiers everywhere and the few townspeople still around had been confined to their homes. Zell charged straight towards his house without waiting. Squall and Quistis stayed behind him as he raced down the front steps and through the door.
Ma, I'm home.
Zell cried out, looking around. His mother, who he could usually find in the kitchen, was nowhere to be seen. He looked around, worried, as Quistis shut the door and locked it. Zell ran into the next room, Squall on his tail.
Ma!
He yelled in relief to see his mother and their neighbor with her son in the back room.
You're safe. Zell!
The round, sweet older woman gasped.
How on earth did you get into town? It's all in the brains, Ma,
Zell bragged smugly, conveniently leaving out Squall was the one who had come up with the lie.
We just said we had some info on Elone. Piece o' cake.
Ma Dinch let out a sigh.
What a relief. I was worried you might have beaten up one of the guards. The soldiers have threatened that the sorceress will burn the town to the ground should there be any disturbance of their investigation.
Squall was suddenly grateful he had opted not to kill the soldier. Discretion was a good choice here.
Is the sorceress here? I did notice a woman with the Galbadian army, not in uniform.
Ma Dinch nodded.
Grey hair, patch over one eye, doesn't really talk much.
Squall frowned.
That sounds an awful lot like Fujin. I guess they finally found Cypher.
Now that he thought about it, he hadn't seen them since Balam Garden had been a missile target. They must have evacuated themselves before the garden began moving.
Leave it to me.
Zell pounded his chest.
I'll get rid of those jokers.
Could Cypher be with them? Squall couldn't help but wonder. Hot hatred poured through his veins, impervious to Shiva's power. The last smug look Squall had seen of him, about to launch missiles at their home as he tortured Squall, was still burned into the back of his eyelids. He hoped Cypher was here. He wanted the pleasure.
Let's go to the hotel,
Squall announced, forcing his dark emotions under control.
If we can deal with the commander, we can lift the siege on Balam. Come on.
Deciding not to waste time, they moved quickly towards the hotel. It was being guarded by 2 soldiers who glared at them as they approached.
What do you want?
One of them asked angrily.
If you're looking for the commander, I have strict orders not to let anyone through. Not even if we have info on Elone?
Squall asked immediately. The soldiers were taken aback by that simple question. They turned to each other to confer quickly, whispering so loudly that Squall and the others had no problems hearing them.
More rumors, you think?
The first guy asked.
You know that we'll get a salary cut if we let him through without confirmation,
the second guy grimaced.
Yeah, I know,
the other guy made the same face.
But in this army your salary gets cut based just on how the boss is feeling. It goes with the territory when you can't choose your own boss and you're forced to work, I guess.
Zell growled in impatience and slammed his foot down, getting their attention back.
Yo, listen. We have top secret info on Elone. Bring your commander out here.
The first guy turned back.
These guys are kind suspicious, hey? Yeah, totally.
The second guy said like he was grateful the first guy had said it first. Then their voices got quiet as they learned how to whisper and conferred again. The second guy turned back again, apparently relieved.
Have some respect for the captain. The captain is currently on patrol. The captain?
Squall repeated.
The captain will take full responsibility,
the first one agreed, also smiling in relief. Damn this army and their inability to function correctly, Squall rolled his eyes.
Where is the captain?
He asked.
On patrol,
the first one repeated, which Squall took to mean that he didn't know.
Now what?
Quistis asked as they walked away.
What else? We start looking for the captain.
Squall shrugged. They were lucky that Balam wasn't that big. They were also lucky that there were no red-wearing superior officers around to confuse things. That made searching for the captain easier. But also more annoying, because there were no red-wearing SOS. They started at the hotel and worked their way down to the docks. All the parking spots had been taken up by Galbadian vehicles. Near the water, they found a soldier kneeling down and pretending to look around while a dog licked itself beside him.
Hey, you seen the captain?
Zell asked him as they walked up.
Hey.
The soldier looked at them, frowning.
The captain? Nah. Sorry. Did you drop something?
Quistis asked as he continued to scan along the ground.
No. I'm looking for something that belongs to Elone.
Squall frowned.
Here. Yeah, they're making me do it,
the soldier said like he realized how sad it was.
They gave me this dog to sniff her out, but we don't have anything that belongs to her. So they ordered me to find something. So I'm just here all day. Searching. Well, good luck with that,
Zell grimaced as they moved on to the next soldier.
Have I mentioned lately how grateful I am not to be in the G Army?
Quistis agreed, nodding her head slowly. The next soldier was standing at the pier on the docks. He was frowning down at the water, some fishing gear set up beside him.
Hey,
Squall called out, turning him.
Have you seen the captain? Oh, yeah,
the soldier nodded.
He was just fishing here. He caught a few and got really excited. Said he was gonna eat 'em right away. Thanks,
Squall said, stepping away from the docks. At least they were on his trail now.
So, where to?
Quistis asked as they walked back up the docks.
Well, if he caught some fish, he'll need to cook them,
Squall reasoned easily. They walked back into town and the sight of smoke pouring from the front window Zell's house stopped them dead.
Ma!
Zell yelled as he sprinted towards his front door. They burst inside but nothing was on fire. There was a horrid stench coming from the smoke in the oven though. Quistis cried out as all three of them covered their faces. Ma Dincht, who was standing off to the side, turned to them.
Oh, hello again, dear. Ma, what happened?
Zell asked, coughing and sputtering.
It smells like someone cooked rancid thrusty meat in here.
Ma Dincht nodded.
Just now, a man came in and asked if he could use the kitchen. I think he cooked some fish. The whole room is filled with this strange odor. I really hope he wasn't cooking VIII fish.
Squall made a face. It certainly smelled like it. VIII fish looked very similar to the famous Balam fish known for their slightly sweet, deliciously savory taste. Unlike Badam fish which were known for violent dysentery and hives.
Did the man say where he was going, Ma?
Zell asked, covering his nose, his voice getting nasally as a result.
No, he just ran out with the cooked fish,
Ma Dincht shrugged.
It's going to take forever to get this sent out.
The three of them walked back onto the street and Zell made a face.
Oh man, this stuff reeks. It's soaked through my clothes. Any thoughts, Squall?
Quistis asked, frowning at the expensive leather of her outfit. It was going to take forever to wash this out. This was fine leather, it held scents like no one's business. Squall frowned at his own jacket.
Yeah, I got one.
He led them back down through the town, to the docks. The soldier with the dog was now scouring an area just a little north of where he had been looking before. The dog was scratching at fleas. Squall walked up to him and kneeled in front of him. Hoping this worked similar to how Angelo sniffed things out, he held out his arm to the dog.
All right boy, follow the scent.
The dog sniffed at him. Sneezed. Took another breath. Then barked at him. Just like that, the dog ran off. Squall jumped to his feet and sprinted after him. The others followed, laughing at his cleverness for thinking of the dog. The dog was fast. His tongue lolling in his excitement, he raced through the town. He stopped first at Zell's house, sneezed a few times, before picking up the scent again and racing on through. Squall stayed hot on his tail as the dog ran up the stairs into the train station. Breathing hard, the three seeds stopped as the dog ran up the steps into the train. The conductor was standing over the bodies of two Galbadian soldiers that were laid out on the ground, grabbing their stomachs and moaning pitifully. He looked up helplessly when Squall and the others came in closer.
See, Captain?
One soldier cried, gagging. Loud barking from inside the train had them looking up. Someone called out. They heard something crash from within. Then, from the other end of the car, a man jumped out. They caught a brief glimpse of baggy black pants and a short blue vest on a dark-skinned, bare-chested man that was running away from the dog.
It's Rajan!
Squall cried out, unsurprised to find out he was the captain. It would only make sense that he would be Fujin's number 2. It only confirmed that those two were here.
Wait, Captain!
The other soldier reached out for his fleeing leader.
Oh, man!
The conductor grimaced.
That guy came and offered these soldiers fish that smelled rather off. I really hope he didn't give them VIII fish. Come on,
Quistis pointed after Rajan.
Let's go.
The three of them turned to run after the captain. Back in front of the hotel, they found the doors burst open and the soldiers trembling.
Hey, you!
One of them yelled, throwing out his hand in terrified warning.
Stand back! This could be dangerous. The commander's just about to. YEOW!
Rajan came flying out the front doors and slammed against the pavement. Groaning, he pushed himself up.
Ouch! F. Fujin! See, control your temper, you know.
Panting, moving like he was sore, Rajan got to his feet.
I was patrolling, just like you told me. I even woke up that search dog, sleepin' on the job, you know.
He turned to the soldiers.
You guys help me out here. We've gotta calm Fujin down, you know.
The doors of the hotel slammed shut and Rajan trembled. Zell stepped forward, drawing in a deep breath.
Rajan! Hey!
The captain turned and his eyes went wide as a big smile burst onto his face.
Whoa! What are you guys doing here? We're here to liberate VIII, you know.
Zell coughed, shaking his head.
I mean, we're here to liberate VIII.
Rajan laughed, putting his hands to his waist.
Man, it's good to see you all again. I mean, wait. Hold on. Rajan, what are you doing here?
Squall demanded to know. Rajan grinned at him.
Oh, that's right. Cypher told us to give you a whoopin' if we saw you, you know. You soldiers, help me out.
VIII was fast. He charged so quickly that Squall barely had time to draw his gun blade. It was such a quick blow that Squall's blade was still half buried in the sheath when he caught the end of VIII's bi-weighted staff.
Woo!
VIII's eyes went wide.
Squall, your blade is red. That's so cool.
Squall gritted his teeth against the pressure VIII was exerting on him. The other man had a great deal of strength and his heavy staff enabled him to wield it effectively. However, Squall wasn't the only one who had taken his time in FH to upgrade. Zell cried out and jumped in, punching towards VIII's jaw. VIII leaned back so Zell's fist and his new steel-plated gauntlets only stirred his short cropped hair. VIII jerked his staff to the side and slammed it into Zell's flank. Squall finished drawing out his blade and sliced down. VIII jerked his staff back and caught the blow. The G-soldiers let out a cry as Quistis caught one by the neck and used her new, strengthened whip to slam him bodily into the other soldier. The red of the Achu tentacle flashed in the sun almost iridescently. The bronze tip at the end may not have been the strongest, but it was sharp and blood started coming from the neck of the first solider as Quistis tossed him around.
You'll pay for this, VIII.
Zell grunted, forcing himself up. His side was bruised and tender, but the pain was quickly fading under Ifrit's magic. His new, metal-plated gauntlets heated up a lot better than his Caterpillar ones. The metal blazed red as Zell attacked. Squall jumped back and out of the way. VIII lifted his staff and deflected the first blow. Then the second. His staff became a blur as he twisted it around almost artistically. Zell's blows were continuously redirected away from VIII's body, irritating him. Quistis jerked her hand up and the soldier trapped in her whip flipped up over her head then down to the surf below. She jerked the whip back down again and the bronze tip slammed expertly through the neck of the other soldier, killing him instantly. She jerked her whip back, curling it up in her hand, and turned to Zell. VIII and Zell were both strength-based warriors. While Zell was a lot more hands-on than VIII was so good with his staff that it may as well have been part of him. He kept his eyes forward, a grin on his face, as he focused on Zell's movements. His body twisted as he swung the staff around and deflected. Until he stabbed forward. The blunt end of the staff slammed into Zell's gut and he coughed. VIII jerked up and bashed Zell's chin. Blood burst from his lip as he fell backwards. VIII twisted and brought the staff up to bring down on Zell's head. Quistis's whip cracked as it encircled the end of the staff from behind. She jerked harshly, pulling VIII off balance. He fell backwards, grunting. The end of his staff hit the ground. VIII stepped onto her whip. Quistis jerked back but VIII was much heavier than the other soldiers. VIII twisted the whip around his foot and jerked back on Quistis, sending her sprawling to the ground. He stepped off and twisted his staff, pulling the handle of her whip from her hand and throwing it to the side.
How was that, instructor?
He laughed good-naturedly, stepping back, helicoptering his staff above his head with one hand.
Getting good, hey.
VIII turned at the last moment and caught Squall's downward slice on the body of the staff.
Man, that's so cool, you know.
VIII declared again.
What's that made of?
Squall attempted to knee him in the gut. VIII bent forward, avoiding the blow. The saber slipped down the staff awkwardly because of its strange shape and VIII fell to the ground. He rolled quickly and Squall's slash cracked the ground where he had laid. Using the staff, VIII lifted himself back up. Zell was back. the blood on his lip still fresh as he attempted to strike Rajan down. Rajan was still laughing as he deflected.
Damn it!
Zell yelled, frustrated. Rajan stomped down, capturing Zell's foot and throwing off his balance. Rajan's fist swung forward and slammed against the other side of Zell's face. The blonde flew backwards, sliding almost to the end of the walk and over into the ocean.
Whoa!
Rajan fell backwards to avoid Quistis's punch. He was standing between her and her whip. He frowned as he ducked back to avoid another strike.
I don't hit girls, you know,
Rajan said, clearly uncomfortable. He ducked out of the way and allowed her to run past towards her weapon. He made a face and charged towards Squall instead. Squall turned the blade up and caught the staff between the uneven, rounded edges of the blade. He twisted, jerking it and raging forward. Rajan fell face first into the butt of Squall's gun. He grunted as blood poured from his nose.
Blizzard!
Squall commanded. The spire slammed into Rajan's gut, throwing him into the air. He flew backwards and landed painfully on his shoulder. He cried out and rolled over, one trembling hand grabbing for his clearly broken shoulder. He couldn't wield his staff with that.
Ugh!
He hissed in through his teeth.
You got me, you know. OHHH.
Zell bared his teeth, grinning.
The commander's gonna get a whoopin', too.
Squall nodded and the three of them ran past the downed Rajan and into the hotel. Fujin turned from the window and glared at them. Her arms were crossed over her chest and she already didn't look happy before recognizing them.
So I guess you're the commander?
Zell grinned, unsurprised as he popped his knuckles.
Pack your bags and get the hell out of Balam.
Fujin's glare moved between the three of them then over their heads.
Raijin, defeated.
Was that her worried face?
That's right, baby.
Zell laughed, baring his fists.
Now, where's Cypher and the sorceress? You're all going down. Zell, calm down,
Squall said evenly, stepping ahead of him. He gave Fujin a level look that she returned.
Fujin, looks like you're on your own. Are you still willing to fight? Rage.
Fujin snarled, reaching for the weapon on her hip. The single sharp spike unfolded with a jerk of her hand. The multi-bladed, bright blue chakram snapped together and she lifted the deadly circle up to eye level. Clearly, the answer was yes. Squall's hand tightened on his weapon.
Wahahaha. She's not alone. Who?
Zell turned quickly. Squall barely jumped out of the way in time to avoid being run over by Rajan charging over to stand at Fujin's side. He grinned, rotating his shoulder.
Major come back, you know. Actually, I feel a lot better, you know. I feel invincible, you know.
He grinned at them, twisting his staff with his formerly broken shoulder.
How they?
Zell fell back.
I thought we defeated you.
Rajan chuckled as he held up an empty X-potion bottle. He licked his lips, drawing in the last drops of the dark purple liquid.
Like a bottled Curaga spell,
he said, quoting the company's line. He tossed the bottle over his shoulder and it shattered against the wall.
Time to get serious, you know.
He continued, laughing despite the statement. Fujin pointed to Squall.
Elone, where? Don't know,
Squall said, mostly honestly. He knew who she was with, but not where. Fujin struck. Squall lifted the blade and caught the chakram against the blade. Fujin snapped her fingers, and the electromagnetic return system, not unlike Rinoa's blaster edge, summoned the circular weapon back to her. Squall followed after it. After her, Zell and Raijin were already back at it. Zell moved too fast for Raijin to get in any blows of his own, but Zell couldn't actually land any of the hits he made either. Quistis looked between the two battles before deciding that Zell would need her help more. She drew back her whip and struck. Raijin, so absorbed in fighting Zell, didn't notice until her whip had caught around his staff again, locking it in place above his head. She couldn't pull him out of place. However, she opened his defenses enough to allow Zell to break through. Faster now that he could finally hit his target, Zell rained down blows against Raijin, who grunted and tried to roll with them as best as possible. Raijin jumped up and slammed both feet into Zell's chest. Zell flew back. Raijin fell down. Quistis jerked the staff from Raijin's loosened grip and back towards her. She caught it neatly. Squall was fielding Fujin's chakram like he was playing a deadly game of baseball. She was able to recall and throw it so quickly that Squall was having trouble getting in closer to her. Not only that, but she had an almost magical control over her weapon. No, she did have magical control over her weapon. Unlike Raijin, who preferred weapons-only fighting, Fujin actually had a GF. Squall tried to recall the name of the creature. He knew only that it had wind-based powers, giving Fujin beyond expert control of her weapon. She could dictate the very currents it ran on, keeping Squall on his toes.
Arrow!
Fujin threw out her hand. Squall fell back, buffeted by a wind that seemed to cut at him like razor blades, leaving no marks on his skin but causing pain nonetheless. If he could get her GF, he could take away her ability to use magic. He would also cut her weapon's ability in half, easily. He lifted his gunblade and let off 2 shots that Fujin dove to avoid. As she was standing back up, Squall charged in closer. She threw her chakram from her position on her knees. It came in low and fast. Squall leapt over it neatly. Fujin hit the return mechanism and pointed her hand at Squall's chest. He threw himself to the side, barely avoiding getting impaled from behind by the returning chakram. Squall could only admire her skill. Hers and Raijin's both. They had the skills, the attitude, and the dedication to make seed. If only they hadn't latched themselves onto Cypher.
Tornado!
Fujin shouted. Squall didn't have time to do anything. The sudden, strong wind caught not only him but Quistis and Zell as well and picked them up. The painful gale ripped at their skin as sand and dust threatened to blind them. The wind took them to the ceiling, then threw them all outward. Zell was slammed against the support beam, almost flying out of the large windows on either side of him. Quistis hit the stairs, crying out in pain as her spin molded unnaturally to the steps. Quetzalcoatl was already giving her a cura spell when Squall slammed bodily against the door. He slid down, falling to his knees, and picked himself up slowly. Raijin caught his captured staff with his foot, then kicked it up into his hands. He kissed the body before twisting it around and grinning at them.
Want a break?
He asked, laughing.
Switch!
Squall ordered. He lifted his gunblade and let off 3 shots, separating Fujin and Raijin as they jumped away from each other to avoid the bullets. Fujin landed right in Zell's path and she had to fall back to avoid the fist he aimed at her head. Her hand caught herself as she fell and she flipped neatly back onto her feet. Squall continued shooting at Raijin, forcing him to keep moving, until he ran out of ammo. Only then did he jump up and charge. Rajan lifted his arm, his staff following the edge of the limb, and caught Squall's side swipe. He punched out, trying to clip Squall on the chin. Even in the close quarters, Squall was able to dodge the one-handed strikes. He reached up and caught the next fist Rajan threw at him. His fingers clenched down and Rajan cried out as freezing ice encased his hand.
Right, you got Shiva.
Rajan managed to grimace and grin at the same time.
She's mighty strong. Cypher wanted her, you know. Yeah, I know.
Squall punched forward and used Rajan's own ice-covered fist to knock him backwards.
She told me that Cypher couldn't handle her power and had to give her back or risk getting frostbite.
Rajan made a face.
Don't like you talkin' bad 'bout Cypher like that, you know. He earned it,
Squall growled. He was still having nightmares about unbearably hot torture chambers and free-flowing electricity. Just the memory of it was enough to frost the air around him to a dangerous degree as Shiva reacted to his emotions.
Cypher's followin' his dreams. Doin' what he wants, you know. Not everyone is brave enough to really live that kinda life, you know.
Squall's blade shined as ice crystals coated it in his anger.
You call that bravery? It's not brave to follow whatever selfish whim your heart has. That's just childish.
The two charged each other. Across the room, Zell was jumping around acrobatically, avoiding Fujin's chakram as it followed him around with her throws, magnet, and magic.
Dinsht is running on all cylinders today.
Zell laughed, narrating himself as he leapfrogged over the check-in desk.
He's up. He's down. He's doing that flippy thingy that the fans go nuts for. Oh, and now he's actually up the wall. And bam!
Zell flipped backwards off the wall, slammed his foot down on Fujin's chakram as he came down. He grinned back at her as she tried to use the return system to call it back. It twitched under Zell's shoe but remained in place.
Judges, score. Arrow.
Fujin threw out her arm. Zell cried out and hunkered down as her magic beat at him. The windstorm ripped over his flesh, causing pain like lashes from a whip as he tried to shield his eyes and keep the chakram under his weight at the same time. Quistis slammed into Fujin's back. A thunder spell erupted from her hands right into Fujin's body as Quistis's palm slammed an open Odin capsule into her spine. Fujin cried out as the electricity ran through her. Quetzalcoatl and Fujin's Wind Guardian Pandemona pulled against each other for a moment. But with Fujin feeling the pain of Quetzalcoatl's lightning, she could spare no efforts to keep her GF with her in her own head.
Fujin!
Rajan turned from his battle at her cry. Squall struck out against him and a long slice opened on Rajan's right arm that leaked blood as he jumped back. He went on the defensive as Squall chased after him. The Odin capsule sealed as Pandemona's energy seeped inside. Quistis struck out a second time and the bolt of lightning she used now sent Fujin flying forward. Directly into Zell's waiting fist. He struck her into the gut and she coughed up blood as he lowered her, rather gently, to the ground. Quistis stepped up behind her, sparks still flickering between her fingers and off of her hands. Fujin groaned but didn't attempt to stand again. Ice shattered as Rajan's staff slammed down against Squall's blade. He wasn't laughing any longer as the two men struggled against each other's strength. Rajan attempted to jerk his staff to the side, but the whirls on Squall's flame saber had the staff trapped into the groove it had fallen into, giving Squall all of the control. Squall jerked back and to the side, sending Rajan to the ground. Rajan tried to roll away. Squall lifted his blade and slammed it down, not where Rajan was but where he would be. The sharp bite of the gun blade sank into Rajan's side. The freezing ice of his magic froze his blood before it could pour out. Rajan cried out in pain as Squall jerked the blade back and stepped back. He kicked Rajan's weapon away and stood at the ready. But Rajan was down too. Squall had deliberately not killed them. They had information he wanted. He nodded to Quistis and Zell and they each grabbed them and dragged them together. Fujin was trying to catch her breath, groaning and clutching her abdomen as Rajan used his vest to cover the hole in his side that was starting to bleed as the heat of his own body thawed the blood.
"Are the two of you taking orders from the sorceress?"
Squall asked immediately. It took a moment for Fujin to answer. She shook her head and had to work to get the breath needed for even her one of single-word responses.
"Negative."
Rajan nodded, agreeing with her.
"The sorceress has nothing to do with us, you know? Never even seen her. We're acting on our own plan." "Your own plan?"
Squall frowned. Rajan grinned.
"Like we told you, we're on Cypher's side, you know. We take orders from him. Gave us this nice army and everything, you know."
Squall nodded once, accepting that.
"That's up to you, but..."
He trailed off as he frowned at the memory of Cypher. Of what he had become. A torturer. A murderer. A bloodhound, in his own words.
"Enough is enough,"
Squall said, his words heavy with his own pain.
"This isn't an internal garden conflict. This isn't a game. We can't back out now, you know?"
Rajan said, getting to his feet painfully. He grimaced and flinched as the move ripped at the hole in his abdomen.
"Negative."
Fujin agreed, getting up herself, helping support him.
"Cypher has a lot of followers, but we're his only friends,"
Rajan smiled sadly.
"We're a posse, you know? The Galbadian soldiers are only listening to Cypher cause they fear the sorceress. Without us, Cypher wouldn't have a posse, you know."
Without them, he wouldn't have any friends. He would be all alone. Zell growled, wishing he could hate them for that. But he saw Squall standing there and he knew that he felt nearly the same way about his leader. Squall was aloof and distant, but he was also dedicated and helpful and good. He had brought Zell along because he knew Zell wanted to help his mom. He tried to keep Zell straight. He was there for him. If Zell turned away from him, if his other friends turned from him, Squall would be all alone. And that was somehow heartbreaking of a thought. Still. He growled and put his foot down.
"If you guys stand behind him that much, then tell frickin' Cypher to stop this nonsense already."
Zell would never be afraid to tell Squall when he was doing wrong. To critique him. He had never needed to, but he knew he could and Squall wouldn't brush him off or get angry. Because that's what friends did. Fujin nodded, as though she had read his thoughts.
"Affirmative." "We ain't no sellouts though,"
Rajan added quickly.
"We're still behind Cypher all the way, you know." "Okay."
Squall nodded, accepting their decision.
"Understood. So you want nothing to do with garden now?"
Fujin and Rajan shared a look before turning back to him and nodding slowly.
"Very well. As commander of the Garden and Seed forces, I hereby officially relieve both of you and Cypher from duty. You may all consider yourselves dropouts of the garden." If you return to the garden, you will be treated as hostiles and handled appropriately.
Fujin and Raijin had their eyes downcast. Not like they regretted their decision, more like they could feel the weight of their own choice pressing down on them. They would make it again in a heartbeat, without hesitation, but Balam Garden had been their home too.
From now on, we're not going to hold back,
Squall warned them. They looked up and nodded again, their eyes firm with their resolution. For the first time, Squall thought he understood what it meant to have comrades. To have people that would be there for you, no matter what. In that way, Cypher was rather lucky. Squall wondered if he even knew how lucky. He turned around and started to leave.
Wait a minute.
Quistis stopped him, looking between Squall and Fujin and Raijin.
That's it? You're going to let them go just like that, Squall?
Raijin made a face, twisting uncomfortably.
Don't wanna talk anymore, you know. Kinda painful, you know.
Fujin looked from Squall over to Raijin. Her eyes were as soft as they had ever seen them. She closed her eyes and took a calming breath. Then she opened them and kicked Raijin firmly in the shin.
Wimp!
Whimpering, Raijin grabbed for his new injury.
Run!
Fujin ordered. Raijin made a small sound of fear as he sprinted out the door. Fujin followed him. And the Galbadians, Squall knew, would follow both of them. Quistis sighed, watching them go. Watching old students of hers go. It wasn't bittersweet like a graduation or an inauguration. She wasn't sure what she felt.
It's too bad,
she said finally, trying to sum it up neatly. Squall shrugged.
Friend or foe? It all comes down to circumstance. That's how we were raised. How we were taught. It's nothing special.
Nothing special. Then, why did Squall feel so? He cleared his throat.
Come on, let's go. We've got work left to do here before we can return to the garden.
Bang! Irvine grinned over the sights of his new shotgun, the Bismarck, as the glass bottle he had been aiming for exploded in a hail of clear, light blue glass. The two glasses on either side of it also shattered from the spread of the shot.
Nice,
he grinned.
And that, ladies, is how it's.
The other 4 bottles lined up on the wooden plank were sliced clean in half as a bright red, incredibly sharp, saw blade raced through them. Including through the air where the 3 bottles Irvine had destroyed had been sitting. Counting those 3 in, the saw blade destroyed all 7 practice bottles set up on their makeshift range at the front of the training center. Rinoa grinned as she caught her new weapon easily. The rising sun. It tended to fly in a straighter line than the Valkyries, but the blades were sharp enough to cut glass. She had been warned not to shoot it again into the active machine parts of a mech, but she had also been told that, if she absolutely had to, the rising sun would come out in much better shape. Irvine's new shotgun, a lot prettier than his Ulysses, clacked as he set it up against his shoulder.
Now, that just ain't right. Jealous.
Rinoa grinned at him, folding her rising sun back into the blaster.
You can't compare apples and baobab fruit, Rinoa,
Irvine said, dignified.
Hey, guys.
They turned as Selfie ran into the training center, laughing.
Guess what? I got news from Balam. Some of the students trapped in there from the siege just got back to garden. Well?
Rinoa asked eagerly.
What's going on?
Selfie grinned.
Squall and the others have successfully pushed out the Galbadians. Yes.
Rinoa fist pumped the air.
But of course,
Irvine shrugged, like it was obvious. Selfie nodded, agreeing with both of them.
Galbadia Garden is pulling out now. Squall said that he and the others were going to stay in Balam for the night though to help get everything back under control. Apparently, the G Army did a number on the place. So they won't be back until tomorrow?
Rinoa asked, frowning.
Sorry,
Selfie made a face. Rinoa sighed and shrugged.
No, it's okay. Want to have some target practice with us? Sure.
Selfie laughed.
Irvi, set up new bottles. I haven't got to play with my new crescent wish yet.
Rinoa smiled as Selfie stepped up next to her. Irvine walked forward happily to reset the shooting range. Rinoa rubbed at her head, groaning.
What's wrong?
Selfie asked, frowning at her.
Oh, nothing. It's just Diablos and Carbuncle. They're going at it again. Your GF don't get along? No, I guess not. I don't really know what to do about it either. Well, why don't you give me Carbuncle?
Selfie suggested easily.
Really? You would take him? If he doesn't mind me. Siren's really nice. She says that she gets along with most everyone. Except Quetzalcoatl. It probably wouldn't be good to have two singing GFs at the same time. Well, okay.
Rinoa beamed and held out her hand. Carbuncle eagerly jumped out of her head and Diablos waved goodbye sarcastically. He was not at all sad to see the tiny blue rat go. Selfie laughed as the feeling of the new GF. She couldn't see him yet, but he felt adorable. He squeaked like a newborn kitten as he bounced around in her head, looking for a place to settle down. Siren raised her song in welcome and the tiny GF seemed really happy to hear it.
Wow!
Rinoa grabbed at her head.
That worked fast. I don't have a headache at all now. Yup. That's the problem when you get GF that don't get along.
Selfie shrugged.
I've never had two GF at the same time before. Should be fun. Alright, ladies.
Irvine turned from the newly set up bottles.
I'll invite myself to go first, if you don't mind. Go ahead,
Rinoa smiled.
Since I dominated you so badly last round.
Irvine grumbled as he lined up his sights again. Selfie chuckled. It wasn't full of the life and vitality it usually held though. Rinoa gave her a look.
Hey, what's wrong? Wrong? There's nothing wrong.
Selfie fixed a smile on her face quickly. Rinoa just looked at it as it slowly melted into a sad frown.
I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. Squall would say not to worry about things you can't change. I wouldn't take emotional advice from Squall.
Rinoa made a face.
Tell me. It's just Trabia. Oh.
Rinoa pulled back slightly, unsure of what to say to that.
Yeah.
Selfie sighed.
I don't really know what to do. Why not just ask Squall to go to Trabia?
Irvine suggested, lowering his shotgun.
I can't do that. We have no reason to go to Trabia. Yeah, we do. You need to find out what happened.
Irvine smiled at her charmingly, and Selfie had to fight to get her heart under control. She knew it was a heartbreaker's smile, but she couldn't help herself but be attracted to it.
Hey, you never know if he'll go if you don't ask. I mean, maybe.
Selfie bit her lip. She did want to know. She felt like that was the worst part. She didn't know. Well, she had a pretty good idea, but she didn't know. That not knowing, that uncertainty, was what really made it that much worse for her.
Hey, it'll be okay,
Rinoa said, reaching out to touch her shoulder.
Squall's understanding. Even if he doesn't really seem like it. I'm sure he'll help if you ask.
Selfie smiled gratefully. Still feeling rather uncertain. The next morning, Rinoa was waiting at the garden gates when she saw the gatekeeper look down, then reach out to lower the lift. Her heart picked up a beat as she got quickly back to her feet from where she had been sitting on the ground against the wall. The lift was too slow as it made its way down. Then even slower as it came back up. Rinoa felt her heart speeding up the closer he got. Squall's head appeared over the edge of the front edge and Rinoa's face broke out into a wide smile. His eyes looked surprised for a moment to see her there before he got his expression under control. Then the rest of his body appeared and she could see he was holding a brown bag in one hand. Quistis and Zell, both of them saying how good it was to be back, walked past Rinoa. Quistis grinned back at the two of them as Squall stopped right in front of Rinoa. She deliberately turned forward again to give them their privacy.
Welcome back,
Rinoa said, holding her hands behind her back.
You waited.
She smiled.
Of course. I told you I would. Are you okay?
He nodded. He stood there for a moment, uncertain of himself. Then, as though he remembered it a bit late, he held up the brown bag for her to take.
What's this?
Rinoa asked, reaching out for it. She opened the bag and the most delightful scent came from within. Her mouth started watering immediately.
Balam fish,
Squall said.
Freshly cooked. You brought me breakfast.
Rinoa looked up, surprised.
As an apology for cancelling dinner.
Rinoa closed the bag and reached out for him. The uncertainty and fear Squall had since he had purchased the food faded as Rinoa took his arm. She put her head on his shoulder and pulled him further into the garden.
Come on. We have time to eat before you have to get back to work, right? Yeah.
He nodded, checking her face to see if she was really happy. He could only see contentment and joy there at his gesture, making him think that maybe he had actually done something right. Around noon, Squall joined Quistis, Sue, and Nita on the bridge. They had pulled Balam Garden closer to the town and they could see for far around that Galbadia Garden was gone. Their garden was packed full of people again. It felt like they were whole once more.
So, where are we going next?
Quistis asked him. Squall was thinking when the platform to the bridge was called down. He turned as Selfie came back up. She was waving at him with a bright smile.
Hello, excuse me. Permission to come aboard, Commander. What is it?
Squall asked, ignoring the formality of the question. Why did no one ever listen to him when he asked them not to give him a title?
Have you decided on a destination?
She asked, shifting her weight awkwardly.
Still thinking? Oh, well, maybe we can perhaps go to Trabia Garden,
she suggested uncertainly.
It's like in the mountains. So maybe the sorceress will leave it alone. But maybe, you know.
Squall frowned. The sorceress wouldn't go to Trabia Garden. It had been destroyed by missiles. Oh. He understood. Of course she'd want to go.
I'll keep that in mind,
Squall nodded. Selfie's smile was radiant as she nodded.
Thanks.
She waved at him as she sank back down the platform. Squall turned back to Nita, who was grinning at him.
What? Oh, nothing. So. Where to, Commander? Trabia is our sister garden,
Squall told him coolly.
If there is a chance that any have survived, then it's our duty to check up on them and offer our assistance. Of course,
Quistis said, grinning knowingly.
Set course for Trabia Garden and announce the departure,
Squall ordered them calmly as he turned to leave the bridge. He wasn't needed to pilot the garden. Quistis, Sue, and Nita shared a smile as he disappeared out of sight. Their leader was really a nice guy underneath it all. Squall left the office, planning on a training session in the monster's lair and wondering where Rinoa was. Because, lately, he was always wondering where Rinoa was. And what she was doing. And if she would mind very much if he went to join her doing it. End of chapter.